1. The Whaling Factory in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit is known for its abandoned buildings, remnants of a time when the city thrived on its industrial power. Among these is the old Packard automotive plant, a massive complex once teeming with life. But after it closed in the late 1950s, it became a ghostly shell, a home for squatters, graffiti artists, and thrill seekers. However, some who venture inside claim the building holds something much darker, something that hungers for the living. Incident 1. The Engineer's Scream. In 2009, a group of urban explorers decided to document the eerie silence of the plant. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine halls, they began to hear faint mechanical sounds, clanging metal, the hum of old machinery, but all the power had been cut years ago. One of the explorers, an engineer by trade, wandered into what used to be the assembly line area. There, he froze in terror. He heard a blood-curdling scream echoing through the empty hall, a scream that seemed to rise from the depths of the building. The group fled, leaving behind their equipment. Later, the engineer confessed he felt like the scream had come from inside him, as if something in the factory had reached into his soul and pulled it out. Incident 2. The Shadow Worker. In 2013, a local photographer decided to capture the decaying beauty of the plant. He set up his camera in what was once the factory's main hall, hoping to photograph the morning light streaming through the broken windows. As he adjusted his lens, he noticed movement in the corner of his eye, a figure dressed in overalls, moving swiftly among the rusted machines. The photographer called out, thinking it was another trespasser, but received no response. He continued his work, but when he reviewed the footage later, the figure appeared again and again, always in the background, always watching. What terrified him most was that the figure was never the same height, and its face was always blurred, as if it were not fully human. Incident 3. The Night Shift. In 2016, 2 security guards were hired to patrol the plant after reports of illegal activities. On their first night, they sat in their patrol car, watching the dark silhouette of the plant against the sky. Around midnight, one of the guards saw lights flickering in a distant window. Thinking it was intruders, they entered the building, only to find nothing. But as they explored further, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps above them, followed by the grinding of old gears. Suddenly, one guard's flashlight flickered, and they found themselves in complete darkness. For the next few minutes, the sound of footsteps surrounded them, echoing through the halls as if the building itself was coming alive. They ran out, never returning. The plant remains abandoned, but some say you can still hear the factory's night shift working long after the last worker left. 2. The Silent Asylum in Waverly Hills, Kentucky. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky has a dark history, originally built to house patients suffering from tuberculosis in the early 1900s. It's estimated that over 60,000 people died within its walls due to the disease and the brutal treatments of the time. After it was closed, the building was left to rot, but the souls who died there never left. Incident 1. The Shadow People. In 2004, a team of paranormal investigators visited Waverly Hills, hoping to document its infamous hauntings. As they walked down the infamous Death Tunnel, a long, dark corridor where bodies were once transported, they felt an unnatural coldness surrounding them. Suddenly, one of the investigators stopped, his flashlight revealing a shadowy figure standing at the end of the tunnel. The figure had no discernible features, no face, just a dark outline. As they watched in horror, the shadow seemed to split into 2, then 3, until multiple shadowy forms began to approach them from all directions. The team fled, but the memory of those silent, moving shadows haunted them. Incident 2. The Nurse's Revenghetto Text. In 2010, a group of college students decided to spend the night inside the sanatorium for a thrill. They camped out in the room where a nurse had hanged herself after discovering she was pregnant by a doctor who refused to acknowledge the child. The students laughed off the warnings of locals, but as midnight approached, they began hearing faint sobbing, followed by the sound of footsteps above them. One of the girls felt a sudden pressure on her neck, as if an invisible noose was tightening. Panicked, they tried to leave, but found the doors wouldn't budge. Only after frantically praying did the door finally open, and they fled, vowing never to return. Later, they found bruises on the girl's neck, in the shape of handprints. Incident 3: The Room of No Return. In 2015, a television crew arrived to film a documentary about Waverly Hills. One of the producers, intrigued by the stories, decided to spend time alone in room 502, where the nurse had died. He locked himself in, determined to debunk the legend. As he sat there, the temperature dropped suddenly, and the sound of someone gasping for air filled the room. He turned on his camera, but it malfunctioned, and he was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, he felt icy fingers wrap around his throat. He struggled to breathe, his vision blurring. Just as he thought he would pass out, the grip loosened, and the door flew open. He staggered out, gasping for breath. The footage from his camera was distorted, but the audio captured a faint whisper, "You shouldn't have come." 3. The Murder House in Villisca, Iowa. In the small town of Villisca, Iowa, sits a house with a gruesome past. In 1912, the Moore family and 2 visiting children were brutally murdered by an unknown assailant with an axe. The house was left as it was, becoming a grim reminder of the tragedy. Over the years, the house remained uninhabited, but it's far from empty. Incident 1: The Children's Laughter. In 2005, a local historian decided to spend a night in the house to collect material for a book. As the sun set, the air grew thick with unease. Around midnight, the historian began to hear the sound of children laughing, followed by the soft patter of footsteps running up and down the stairs. But the laughter was not joyful. It was distorted, as if it came from far away and through a veil of pain. The sound grew louder, filling the house until it was deafening. The historian ran out, his sanity shaken. He later found out that many others had heard the same laughter, always at the same time, always at the hour the children had died. Incident 2: The Shadow in the Attic. In 2012, a group of ghost hunters entered the house, focusing on the attic where the killer was believed to have hidden before striking. One of the hunters decided to spend time alone in the attic, hoping to provoke a response. As he sat there, he began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread. He turned on his flashlight, but it flickered and died. In the darkness, he felt something watching him, something cold and malevolent. He heard a whisper, followed by the sensation of icy breath on his neck. Suddenly, he was shoved to the ground by an unseen force. The others found him later unconscious, his face twisted in terror. When he woke, he refused to speak of what he saw, but he left the group and never returned. Incident 3: The Axe Man Returns. In 2016, a couple of paranormal enthusiasts booked a night in the house, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. They set up cameras and recording devices throughout the house. Around a.m., they were awakened by the sound of creaking floorboards. The man went to investigate, finding nothing but an empty hallway. As he returned to bed, they both heard the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against wood, like an axe being dragged across the floor. Terrified, they tried to leave, but found the door locked from the inside. The scraping grew louder, closer. Suddenly, their equipment started to malfunction, capturing distorted images of a shadowy figure wielding an axe. The door finally opened, and they ran out. When they reviewed the footage later, they found a single frame showing a dark figure standing at the foot of their bed, an axe raised above its head. Thanks for watching, and we hope you were thoroughly spooked. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror content and check out our other videos right here. Who knows what other mysteries are lurking in the shadows?